gonna get started, everyone, okay?
I'll talk real quick.
They're getting started.
All right.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. At this time, I'll do the roll call. Nancy Baker.
Here.
Ronnie Beal.
Here.
Gary Blevins.
Here.
Richard Bunio. Jack Hahn. Here. Ira Dove. Jeannie Duncan. Jeannie Duncan.
Here.
Joyce Edwards.
Here.
Jeff Eck. I've got it right. Jim Holland. Billy Kennedy.
Present.
Michael Lavender. Pat McGinnis.
Here.
Mike Norris.
Here.
Marsh Pittman. And Steve Smith. Got a couple of proxies we have before. Public comment. Besides Jerry, has anybody else signed up? Mr. Rice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I hope y'all had a great holiday. Y'all look healthy anyway. You might have made it through all right. Come on. Take you down another road today. You ever heard of, what's this thing, opioid? Have you heard anything about that? No. Well, you know, I guess I'm out of the fishbowl. I like to think outside the box. But this is not a crisis today. It ain't just happened. This crisis has been going on since early 2000. There's over 300 and some thousand, almost 400,000 opioid deaths in '99. So, why it's a crisis today? This is my fishbowl story outside the box. I think it's something called cholesterol, scans. Just name whatever you want to name that hospitals and doctors do to fill in to make money. And then think about opioid crisis and why it's a crisis today. The hospitals are going down, thousands of people are losing their jobs, so something has got to fill in that gap. So why not stir up something like, hey, you got a cholesterol check? You need to go to the doctor. Now, if you think I'm far-fetched, just ask some doctors that's willing to tell the truth, or workers that I hear and doctors that talks to me. And you'll find out the hospital is looking for revenue. So when you think about the opioid crisis, I want you to take one opioid person as a crisis person, and I want you to connect that person to every agency that person and their family is going to be connected to, and you multiply that one person by 7 in the family. Now you understand the picture of the fishbowl, what you're in and what you're seeing. So to me, it's a revenue stream. Now I might not be talking politically correct here, but I think people need to think about this when you're on the inside working with these people. It's no different than working with DSS and finding out that it ain't nothing but a traffic. What do they call it? Child trafficking? Child trafficking. Well, where do they come up with these numbers? If you look at these numbers over DSS cases, it is consistently year after year after year. Why is that? How do these numbers stay consistent? If it don't stay consistent, the employers are out of the job. Now, do they really need that service? I'm giving you a big picture here. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is review and approval of the agenda and the prior meeting minutes from November 30th, 10.1 time ago. Does everyone have a chance to review the agenda and the minutes from November 30th?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next item is the conflict of interest disclosure on Tracy Hayes, our general counsel, and CCO.
I have not received any meeting reported or
changed in your circumstances. However, I have received a request from the CPAC regarding the substance use position. They're having a very hard time finding someone who meets the criteria for that position, and have asked if I will consult with DHHS as to whether or not they would approve Judy Johansson coming back onto the board, even though she works with one of our providers. So I'm going to make that request unless you.
Object, we need to run this through our local CPAS, all of them,
Okay.
before that goes forward.
Okay. It's
Some
entirely up
of
to you.
them have serious concerns about the fact they feel they need a voting member to represent that slot.
It would be a
It would
voting.
be a voting.
It would be a voting.
But, yeah, I'm sorry that we've lost you, and I'm glad I wasn't here to have anything to do with it when that happened. But these decisions, each one of our regions needs to meet and discuss this, and this needs to be a unified decision by CPAC before anybody contacts anybody on behalf of CPAC. We all need to work together.
Absolutely. So just let me know when you all have gone through that process,
Thank you.
what your decision is. I think we have hearing next
Yeah.
month.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next item is 2018 board and committee appointments. Anybody has in their packet, turn to that information that has 2018 committee appointments. I'll just go through them, and then we would need, I guess, a motion to nominate for certain committees. Is that correct? Okay. So that would be adding Mike Morris and Gary Blevins to the executive committee. The Finance Committee adding Steve Smith, adding Mike Norris and Gary Blevins to the Regulatory Compliance and Quality Committee, and adding Jim Holland and Ira Dove to the Bylaws and Nominating Committee. And I guess we do two motions, one is that. Okay. Is there a motion to make those appointments to those committees?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor of those nominations, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, and then we need to reappoint to the executive committee, Rick French, Ronnie Bill, and Michael Lavender. Finance committee, Rick French, Ronnie Bill, Michael Lavender, and Nancy Baker. Regulatory compliance and quality committee, Billy Kennedy, Jack Kahn, Jeff Eck, Pat McGinnis, Jeannie Duncan. Bylaws and nominating committee, Rick French and Pat McGinnis and George Edwards. Is there a motion to reappoint those members?
So
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of making those reappointments, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Aye.
Maybe I shouldn't move it since I'm on that group.
You're good. Next item, I'd call on Jeannie Duncan, report on the Provider Advisory Council.
That was quick. And actually, it's fresh on my mind because we just met yesterday. We had to reschedule because of all the bad weather we've had. The primary thing on our agenda, and we do thank Vaya for having lunch for us yesterday so we could make up some time because we had quite a full agenda yesterday. But we did have Tara Larson came and presented the Western North Carolina Substance Use Alliance Plan. We went over all the strategies that have been established in that plan, what the purpose of those strategies, how the alliance is actually organized with a steering committee, and then the various other committees who have worked for the past year on developing those strategies. And then also the new committees that will be established going forward and looking for interest in those. And quite a few of the strategies had goals that will go to the PAC. The PAC will be the leader on working on those strategies and trying to meet with those goals. Initially, we started yesterday with kind of brainstorming how we wanted to approach that, recognizing, I think that yesterday's meeting was good and that all folks recognized that it would really be cross disabilities, that all the IDD subcommittee, the substance use subcommittee, and the mental health subcommittees would all have some input and some work to do in all of those as the substance use issues that we have across all disabilities. So we're excited to have a good plan to work on this coming year to add to the things we're already have been working on. I think that, you know, really this PAC has done a lot of work this past year. I'm really proud of the work that they've done and in partnership and in support of Vaya. We spent in the afternoon, or at least about an hour and a half, I guess, talking about the Total Care project that Vaya has been working on for actually quite some time, but the innovations waiver, individuals were brought into that. And just like implementation of anything new, there's always bugs to be worked out. And one of the things we dealt in depth on yesterday was the plan for IDD consumers. Because the total care plans that are coming out of the system are very medical in nature, and trying to work with that format and also expand that format, because the IDD community is really used to working with very person-centered plans. And not that the mental health and substance use don't have person-centered plans as well, but they're not, the IDD community, our plans are not generally as medically oriented. So I thought, I was pleased at least with the outcome of the meeting yesterday. I think a lot of people got a lot of providers got their questions answered. Vaya had taken the recommendations, had heard our input over the last month or so as we've been working with those, and have made some changes to improve those plans. And I think most everybody left feeling a true partnership with, and that this will, there's some good information on the plan that we didn't have before. So I think ultimately the outcome will be good for all providers and everybody that, you know, that will be working with them. But I want to thank you for hearing us and working on those to get the other information added. So I think it'll be good in the end. So, sorry I missed. I know, I hate you weren't there. But Christina, she's doing well for you.
You did a great job.
Yeah, her and Judith did a good job.
So how many people were there?
They were over 50.
Okay, so do the other providers that don't have people, aren't able to send people there, they get this information too?
Yes, we do send it. We have a communication forum that we send information out to, called My Committee. They get to, they can go on and access all the minutes from all of our meetings, the agendas for our meetings. In addition, I maintain a listserv of all providers who have any interest in the IDD, everything they, you know, everything they, so they have a forum to communicate even outside of Vaya's email and all of that stuff, so that, you know, if they feel more comfortable just sending me stuff, and then I can, you know, de-identify it or whatever. But they generally don't have any problem telling Christine or anybody else at Vaya how they feel about things.
We have a great provider council. The participation is really, really great representation. We're very fortunate. It's really grown through the years.
Yeah, it's our attendance is usually over 50 every month now, and you know, we had gotten down to where we might see 13 sometimes, 10, 12 or 13. And so I think it's, rather than Vaya coming presenting to us all the time things, we ask them what we need. And it's kind of been a whole different approach for, you know, this is what we're working on, how can you support us in that. And I think we've had a pretty successful year. It was a little bumpy to start with, but I think providers are getting used to it. They're feeling comfortable with it, and they really are giving a lot of feedback, a lot of input.
So you get that innovation from people in the field that are actually doing it.
That's right. Exactly right. So there's probably not a week that goes by that I don't have somebody send me an email and say, please add me to the list. I want to start attending. I want to start getting this information. And I send out all kinds of crazy stuff, not even related to, and I'll send crazy videos out and national news and things like that. You get some of it. So, you know, so it's sort of an education, trying to educate people on what's going on out in the, you know, outside of North Carolina as well. So I think we're doing well. And, you know, I talk a lot about the IDD subcommittee because that's the one I chair. But the substance use and mental health subcommittees are doing very much similar work. And then we come back together in the afternoon to talk about, issues, what they're working on, and then issues that cross disabilities, so.
Okay, thanks. You deserve a lot of credit.
Thank you.
So we hope to be very successful on some of the substance use strategies that have been sent our way.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the Consumer and Family Advisory Committee, called Pat McGinnis.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We held combined holiday meetings in December. Asheville and Silva met on the 4th at Lake Junaluska Assembly. In Waynesville, Lenore and Boone groups met on December 11th at the Daniel Boone Inn. We reflected on CFAC activities of 2017. We generated ideas about how to attract and retain new members. Our local meeting in January, we tried to talk about a little succession planning, and we recorded all these ideas and going to continue the discussion at our local meeting. And actually, our local meeting was canceled due to weather, and we're going to meet in Lenore Monday. So Silva met January the 9th, Boone January the 16th, and Asheville the 22nd. I believe Boone had to meet by telephone. I'm not 100% sure, but we've had some weather issues this month affecting our meeting schedule.
It's been cold, but yes, we do have phones and internet.
Agendas included extensive discussions about CFAC recruitment and retention strategies, also recruitment kits that contain CFAC brochures, Vaya information, and CFAC applications. We also discussed in succession planning. We also reviewed the 2017 survey results from the CFAC self-assessment, and that was administered by the state's Community Engagement and Empowerment Team. Also, each local group completed this in August 2017. In February, our steering committee will review the Vaya CFAC self-assessments in comparison to data that was collected from all the CFACs across the state. We've also shared information and attended various committee meetings, including human rights committees, provider council, state CFACs, and they also talked about the NCDO platform and advancing North Carolina's Whole Health Coalition. Our steering committee meetings on February the 12th. 4 CFAC members were fortunate to be at Pinehurst. 2 CFAC members last week were at the quarterly peer learning meeting, and I presented on CFAC and Karen on client rights. Mandy Cohen came to the last state CFAC meeting, and that was the second Wednesday in January. And we have invited Ronnie Bill at a time to be determined to possibly come and present to the state CFAC meeting on how state CFAC and other CFACs can work closer with the county commissioners. So that's our CFAC meeting for right now. Thank you. Nancy, you have
Lunch
anything to
will be
add?
served.
That goes without saying. Our next item is our report of the Chief Financial Officer, Clark Phillip.
Thank you, Rick. In general, the financial situation of the company is relatively good. We will go through some of the reports that we typically go through, starting with the current ratios, which is the ratio of current assets, current liabilities. The top graph is the Medicaid current ratio, and the bottom graph is the total combined current ratio. Both of them are substantially in excess of the one-to-one current ratio requirement. The next page are the defensive intervals, which are the cash on hand, not including the risk reserve revenue cash, which is restricted. And these are available to pay operating expenses, and you can see we are well in excess of our 30-day requirement in both Medicaid and the combined defensive interval. The third page is the medical loss ratio. You can see that the medical loss ratio has gone up. That is occurring for a couple of reasons. We certainly had some additional PTRF expenses over the first 5 months of the year, and then also the The intermediate care facility expenses have been higher than budgeted. We have noticed that our membership mix is changing slightly, which may be driving this. Some of our lower cost, lower revenue members are declining in terms of enrollment, while our higher cost, higher revenue members are remaining in place. So the mix is shifting a little bit, which may be driving this.
On insured or uninsured?
On the Medicaid.
On the Medicaid.
On the Medicaid, yes.
Okay.
So we think that's contributing to the growth, as well as the two service items that are a little higher. Medicaid loss ratio is a total of 89.4%. 85.3% is relative to services, and another 4.1% is relative to the healthcare quality improvement expenses that are considered part of the medical loss ratio. Looking at the next schedule is the income statement. You can see that that on the Medicaid line of business, if you flip to the second page, the first line in yellow, you can see that we have a net operating surplus of $1.9 million versus a budget of a little over $1 million. So we've got a positive $800,000 variance on the bottom line. And that's not including the risk reserve revenue. On the non-Medicaid, we are behind budget by $1.7 million. So the net of that is about an $900,000 negative variance for the enterprise overall. But once again, it does not include the risk revenue, risk reserve revenue, which is $2.7 to $2.8 million. If you include that, that moves the enterprise bottom line up to $1.9 million profit year to date through the first 5 months of the year.
Is that sustainable though?
We are doing some reforecasting right now. We have evaluated that. We're confident that we're still going to be on track in terms of budget at this point. But whether we can beat that or not still remains to be seen.
Because part of that risk reserve is used to make up that loss, right?
Part of the fund balance.
Fund balance, yes, yes.
Moving on to the next page are some additional detail relative to the Medicaid services. We compare the actual amounts to the budgeted amounts, and just for informational purposes, out on the right-hand side, we have the amounts that were included in the data book. So there are two line items, as I mentioned earlier, that are more out of line than the others. That's the PRTF services and the intermediate care facility services. One thing I would say about the data book services is, once again, that assumes that the mix of members is the same that was contained in the data book, and we know that our mix is changing. So that's one difference that's driving some of the differences in costs.
Now that you got it, I'm sure you got a report on Medicaid before.
So
On the price of services, that we want to be.
the prices services are favorable at this point. They're favorable to the point we budgeted. We budgeted, you can see, what's contained in the data book is worth about $1 PMPM. We budgeted $2.30 PMPM for crisis services. We have not incurred that level of services that we thought we might. We've only incurred roughly $1.45 per member per month. So we're higher than what the data book assumed, but we're lower than what we budgeted.
This is 60 days in.
November? Yes.
We'll see what it looks like in about April.
Okay, the next sheet is the comparative balance sheet. And And behind that is the related statement of cash flows. Our cash has increased over the first 5 months by about $2.5 million. So that's positive. The things that are driving the additional cash there were about almost $8 million of additional accounts receivable that were collected during the year.
Change we can bring this age.
We can bring it on to one page if you like, I think.
My Walmart can't.
Yeah, I agree with you. We'll make this a little bigger.
The guy that he's here, he's got my.
I know, it's a blur.
So we'll certainly work on getting that turned a little bigger so it's a little easier to read. But anyway, the cash overall increased $2.5 million. That's mainly driven by 3 things. We collected $8 million of our accounts receivable during the first 5 months. And we paid down about $6 million of our accounts payable. And we also went up about $2 million on the IBNR reserve, which is a source of cash because it's accrual when we have increased during the first 5 months. So those 3 things were really what's driving the $2.5–3 million increase in cash.
Is that bills we hadn't collected before and that we were working, I thought we talked about that at the last meeting about making good progress on collecting on some debt that we had.
Is that out of the $7 million that was collected, about $4 million of it related to, I believe it was single stream funding that had been paid in the year.
So is that going to stay that way, or is that a one-time thing? I mean, is it?
Does it continually die? Yes.
Okay.
But that's
And were those on claims differences? Is that some of the stuff you're arguing with the HHS about the coding and terminology or something like that?
I think you're talking about the encounter claims.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not sure about this.
Yeah, I mean, we are, because the encounter process is a difficult process with the state still. We are doing everything we can to smooth that process out. It still lags, and there are still a lot of initial rejections that we have to go back and rework and work with providers to get potentially resubmitted. So,
Persevere.
we are persevering. We're doing all we can to make the system smoother, but some of that has been taken out of our control because we used to be able to go in on an encounter and correct that encounter with the provider's data with NC tracks. We can no longer do that. The provider has to do that. We have to get the provider to go back and correct their data with NC tracks. NC tracks is slow to respond to those corrections, so we're somewhat hamstrung in how quickly we can get those things done.
Yeah, that NC Tracks has not been a smooth ride for any of the departments that we've had trouble with too. So, thank you.
That concludes our report.
I have a question. Yes. I need some education on finance lawsuit. What's the difference between a defensive interval and days cash on hand?
They're really, it is the same thing. The defensive interval is the cash on hand. So, as you can see on the Medicaid component of that, there's approximately, I think if I recall correctly, 87 days of cash on hand, and the requirement for DMA is 30 days cash on hand.
I just know when our hospital gets anywhere near 30 days, there's sort of a panic button thing that goes off and whatnot. Is there a good reason for that to actually be a standard for
30?
For an insurance company?
It seems like a low standard to me. I'm not sure where the standard came from, so.
Yeah. I mean, that's been, the total defensive interval has actually been falling, sort of, for the last year.
Right.
Is there internally in your mind a number that would actually be a concern rather than 30 days?
Well,
I mean, we never know when the state government is going to stop writing checks for about 30 days.
You could ask it this way, if I could interpret your question and reformat it.
Yes, please.
So Clark has a, deep experience with for-profit commercial insurance. So if you were sitting in a board of directors meeting at a different company, what would you be shooting for the days of cash? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, it is. And, to be honest with you, the for-profit companies don't pay a lot of attention to cash because they're so cash heavy. It's not a measure we typically look at. What we do pay a lot of attention to is the net worth of the company, because there are very strict statutory requirements around the net worth of the company.
To answer your previous question about why, which I interpret your question to mean why is the standard set so low at 30 days?
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Well, I guess there's a couple of ways you could look at that. One, you could say that someone would want to make it look like folks have a lot of available cash, when in fact, because the standard is so low, you really don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then the other, you could look at it another way, because there are warning buzzers and bells that sound if someone were to get below that. So, they're providing a lot of tolerance for people to maybe not have a lot of money and not get dinged. So you can have your choice of those two reasons, I guess. Those would be the things that I would offer as explanations for why we set it at 30. I know that we had asked for 60 days as a more reasonable, prudent standard, and why somebody decided 30, well, now we're back again.
Thank you.
I was at our hospital board meeting last night, and we've got 150-day defense venerable, but this on that 150 to 275 million range for hospitals nationwide, they've gone from over 100 to 70 something days in the last year. So I was asking why that was happening, and I think it could be some of the government's trying to, like you say, get that, not to have any of the organizations that are nonprofits or public things, and if these hospitals are publicly owned, they're pulling back that extra down to 70, yes, in 1 year. And I questioned that. He checked the numbers, and it's dropped over, from 40% or something in the number of days, and that was the average for the hospitals, rural hospitals that are in that 150 to 275 million range. So that's curious to me, and I just can't help but thinking that it's, the government says they're going to be there, but they say you don't need that reserve, but we've seen that that's not something you can count on necessarily all the time. So.
Well, yeah. Any other questions?
How do we stand with our peers?
Good question.
Are they closer to 30, or do we have some pretty solid peers beyond 2 that we're pretty close to?
Well, looking, this is just off the top of my head, just anecdotally from looking at some of the DMA reports of our peers. Our cash has dropped more than some of the others for a variety of reasons. Now, are we in danger relative to the requirements for defense interval? No. Some other our peers have better intervals than we do. So I would say none of us are in trouble at this point, but there's a difference in the amount of defensive intervals that we have.
There's actually, this goes to that summary report, the EMA summary report, and if you wanted to, tomorrow, we could look at it. It's very, it'll take you a little bit to get your brain wrapped around it, but once you understand what the categories mean, it's very telling. All you have, here's an important thing. Look at the trajectory of this, so document 2, total defensive interval. What is the trend on that? Our money it's the simple version of it, and Clark and I were talking about this right the minute before we came over here today. And I'll talk a little bit, I ended up in a little bit of a firefight at the LOC based on a report that preceded mine around the whole fund balance thing, how much money is there, da-da-da-da-da-da. So, our ability to accumulate savings is being reduced at the same time that more money is being taken away from us. It's a simple way I can, so at both ends, that's why you have that. And it's the challenge is to illustrate that in a way that everybody can understand other than the words that I'm choosing and things like this, because it's the comment at that LOC meeting was, well, they've still got $1 billion even though we made these cuts, which is factually incorrect to begin with, and it's not about that. It's about the available cash. But isn't that a great soundbite?
They leave out the part that we can't touch.
Yeah. I got to add that in. Well, yeah, it's just a relentless kind of thing.
But do you think they heard those words, can't touch?
Yeah, and we're, well, let's get this down. I can talk more about that.
All right, we need a motion to approve the financial reports.
So moved.
We have 2 motions.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the financial report, say aye.
We can correct.
Okay. All right, next we have a report of Vaya Health Community Integration Achievements. Is Jim Branham.
Good. People usually say Brand Ham.
Right.
Sort of hard to follow up after math class, but I'm glad I get to do this. My name's Jen, and I have been with Vaya, since 2013. I was one of the old Western Highlands people when we merged. And since then, I have had the thrill of working with the department. My job is an Olmsted SIS manager. So I have 2 teams of individuals that I supervise and manage and make sure we're out there doing great work. And tonight I'm going to feature sort of the Olmsted team and what we do and what we've done and what we're going to do, and just let you sort of celebrate some of the successes that we've had this year. So I'm real informal, so if you have a question or if you have a comment, just throw it out there. I don't have to wait till the end. But I just wanted to share some information with you. The couch is hitting me. All right. So with Vaya, we have our small department of our Olmsted care coordinators. We have 3 care coordinators that cover our 23 county area. Our job is to deinstitutionalize individuals who are living in institutions. An institution could be something like the Riddle Center, or it could be an ICF. It's used typically 6 beds or more, and it has that ICF level of care. DMA brought in a project grant in 2010 called Money Follows the Person. And what Money Follows the Person does, it gives each MCO, LME, whatever's in existence at that time, slots, NC Innovation slots, to support individuals living in these settings to lead, come into their communities and receive the right supports at the right time. So we work very closely with DMA following the Money Follows the Person guidelines Unfortunately, it is a demonstration grant, and we do know that it goes away in 2020. And Vaya has been very committed to ensure that just because it goes away in 2020 doesn't mean our work stops. We're going to get creative and find other funding streams, and we're going to continue to pull more and more people out of these settings. So each year, we get 9 innovation slots per year from DMA just for this project and purpose. What we find at Vaya is we do really great work, and we'll burn through our slots really quickly. And a few years ago, it was very frustrating to me to know that I didn't have any more available slots, but that MCO over on the coast didn't touch one. So I just started calling DMA as much as I could and say, hey, if they're not going to use it, can I have it? And at first they giggled a little bit at me. Oh, that's funny. And no, I'm very serious. And I just was very set in making sure they heard the message that if we had more slots, we could deinstitutionalize more people. So after a couple of years of having this awkward conversation, I think they all got together and said, yes, if NCOs are not using their allocated slots, other NCOs can request those slots. So last year, I was able to take away 2 extra slots that were allocated for another NCO, and each slot is worth $135,000. So within that, we were able to get 2 of those back and deinstitutionalize 2 additional people. For this year, just know that I started asking for extra slots in October, and I will keep up my monthly practice. And once we get those, which I feel very, very firmly assured that we will, we'll make sure that you guys know and we can celebrate that. So the goal of Money Follows the Person is just to really support individuals returning to their home communities. And we have pretty strict guidelines. First thing we want to do is make sure that the person's eligible for Money Follows the Person. We field a lot of calls for people who want to get into this wonderful program that don't meet the criteria. Before I came over today, I had an awkward conversation with a family that's in California, and their house has burned down since the fires. And they had gotten my name from someone and said, we want an MFP slot. And I explained, well, number one, you have to have North Carolina Medicaid. Get here and then let us work with you. And they are moving to Asheville in May, so we'll work with this family despite what their issue is, just to ensure that people are in the communities of their choice. So to be eligible for this Money Follows the Person program, you have to live in an ICF, skilled nursing facility, or a state hospital, or a PRTF, which we don't work a lot with PRTFs, for at least 3 months. So you have to be in that facility for 3 months. This year, we did work with a hospital in Virginia that was billing North Carolina Medicaid. An 8-year-old was dropped off at an ED. Her mother refused to pick her up. Mission sent her to Cumberland, and then we were able to step in. And the girl is in a great, loving home today. So you just have to be in that. So typically, we don't work in regular hospitals, but this time we did. When I say meet NC Innovations program eligibility, just making sure that you do hit those boxes to receive IDD services. So supporting individuals as they begin to lead their facility-based life into a community-based life is usually very scary for guardians, but the individual themselves are beyond themselves. So it's neat with that first meeting that you have everyone together. There's some really crazy energy going on in those rooms. But by the time we leave that first meeting, everybody's on board. They understand what we're doing. North Carolinians are moving into their homes, coming back with their families, going to schools, getting real jobs, and being parts of their local communities. Last March, the Supported Living Initiative kicked off, in which that provides a service for individuals with intellectual disabilities that are on the waiver to own or live in their own homes of their choosing. So with that supported living definition coming out, we were able to work with the providers within Vaya and the consultants and really get a step up on using that. This young man, Aaron, who I'm about to speak with, Vaya supported four staff, Vaya staff, to attend something called Advancing Strong Leaders a couple of years ago in Raleigh. And we would go and we would meet and we would brainstorm and we would learn a lot about what it takes to be a leader in North Carolina for people with IDD. DMA sat us all, or I'm sorry, the division sat us all around at a table, all the Vaya staff, and they would present you hard, difficult problems. So all the Vaya staff are sitting at one table and we get our problem. And the problem was Aaron lives in Ohio. His family's desperate to come to North Carolina. How can we get Aaron to North Carolina? So we started thinking about it, and maybe we could use MFP. And we came up with this problem-solving thing that turned into a reality. Somebody from the council was there and overheard our plan and said, why don't you do it? So with that information and that problem that we learned from Advancing Strong Leaders, we were in touch with this family. Aaron's in the middle, and this is brother Tommy Jr., Mary, and Tom Sr. So they were in Ohio, and Tommy Jr., this is an old picture. The little boy lives in Charlotte at this time. Mom and Dad were aging, and they were desperate to come to North Carolina so they could all be one unit. They were really concerned about leaving Ohio, coming to North Carolina, because you can't transfer waivers state to state. So if Aaron were to come to North Carolina, he would be put on the Registry of Unmet Needs and likely have to wait a few years. Aaron has some pretty high needs. He's autistic. He's got some mental health issues around anxiety and some bipolar. So his family really couldn't envision Aaron coming down to North Carolina and hanging out for a couple of years until he could get a slot. So we talked about money follows the person. We don't like to put people in institutions. We don't like to access ICFs if we don't have to. But a part of our problem solving with our Advancing Strong Leaders was in our Pollyanna world, Aaron would live in an ICF for 90 days, and then we would come in and take him out. So the family came to North Carolina for our first team meeting, and we said, this is what we think we can do. You don't have North Carolina Medicaid, we need you to do that. So the family said, yeah, we're willing to roll the dice and take it as it is. The family came down to North Carolina one weekend. Our staff member, Lindsay, met them up in Wilkes County. There was an opening in an ICF. They took a visit. They liked what they saw. They drove over to DSS, and Aaron had North Carolina Medicaid that day, and he went to go live in his new ICF the following day. 90 days later, here comes the Olmsted team knocking on the door. So before Aaron came, he did live up in Ohio. He went to a regular public school with his brothers and his neighbors. He was very engaged. He was really big into the Boy Scouts. He went to the prom, not a special prom, a real prom, and he was really valued in his community. So after they graduated in Ohio, they're still there. I should have done this before I talked about all the others. So sorry about that flow. So Aaron at this time is still in Ohio. He's graduated from high school, and his whole life has changed. They didn't know what they were going to do. They have a similar innovations waiver in Ohio, but it's not real beefy. You don't get a whole lot with it, but just a little bit. So his family were really concerned about how do we make Aaron a part of his community in Ohio. They found a provider who owned this house, and they said, move your son into this house, and it will be his house forever. He will be the only one to live in this house. And the family's like, oh, it doesn't get any better than that. The provider moved Aaron into their house that they owned, and then they realized that his Social Security and other funding would not cover enough for them to make a profit. So overnight, not informing Aaron's family, not even informing Aaron, they moved in one person. 2 days later, they moved in another person. So they turned Aaron's individual home into a group home. Shortly after that, Aaron started sleeping in his living room. His doctor added extra medications, and then he just began experiencing some other issues, and uresis was a big issue. So that's when his family really got on board. Let's get to North Carolina. Let's do this. We got him to Wilkes County. He moved in. 90 days later, we're starting our transition process. So Aaron, that's Lindsay, who works at Vaya, and Lindsay would meet quite often up in Wilkes County. His family sold their house. They moved to North Carolina. They're living in Tommy Jr.'s neighborhood. Aaron's in his ICF. We're all preparing, and then we decided, hey, let's let Aaron really have his own home. Let's do some supported living with Aaron. And there are a couple of naysayers. You can't move someone from an ICF into their own home. What are you thinking? We're thinking with the right supports and the right technology that anyone can live in their own home. We just have to try. So after some really great planning, finding some good providers, Aaron discharged from his ICF into his own home on August 21st. Aaron is renting an apartment in Concord, North Carolina. He's pretty vocal, he's pretty loud, he makes some really interesting noises, but one of the first things that we did was let Aaron get to know his neighbors. And his neighbors are not staff, his neighbors are neighbors. And sometimes he'll hear Aaron going in the middle of the night, and instead of calling mobile crisis or 911, they go down and knock on his door and say, hey, what can I help you with? So it's really neat to see how this apartment complex came together and really supported Aaron. This afternoon, and when I got back from lunch, it's been a pretty good day. I got an email from Aaron's mom, and Mary has huge wishes for her kid, just like all of us do. And she had kept driving by a house that was for sale. Aaron had a little bit of savings through an ABLE account. And Mary thought, what the heck, I'm going to try it. She lowballed an offer on a house in which they accepted today. So Aaron will be a homeowner after he signs the paperwork in a couple of weeks. And he'll move from his apartment into his forever home. 2 streets over, his brother lives. 3 streets the other way, his mother lives. So they're all in the same neighborhood. After we got Aaron out, we started seeing this new person develop. His sense of humor has really, really gotten to us. And he's just a really fun, neat guy.
How old is he here now?
He's 40 years old. This is Aaron just a few weeks ago. This is his family, and actually, and his nieces as well. And he never really had a relationship with because they've been here in North Carolina. They're all very happy, one cohesive family, and Aaron is doing great. And he's a homeowner. So I sort of gave one of my staff a hard time today when she's talking about, oh, I think I'm going to go look for another apartment. I said, well, at least Aaron owns his home at home. So it's sort of nice to see those successes. He's doing great, and for people who say, oh, supported living will never work with my person, I have some pictures to show and some stories to tell. It does work. Joe, this young lady, I got a call from a skilled nursing facility who said, come get her. We're ready for her to go to a different skilled nursing facility. She's too hard to handle. And I said, well, that's not a part of our job. If she wants to come live in the community, we're happy to come get her and work with her. But we're not going to send her from placement to placement to placement. A lot of mixed information, so I decided, let me just get in the car and go meet this young lady and see what's going on. Jo is 51 years old, and she was residing in a skilled nursing facility down in Rutherford County. She is total needs. She has cerebral palsy. She has a feeding tube, and she has very limited control of her muscles and functions. When I got to meet Jo, this was her communication device. I was a little horrified at the fact that that was her communication device. Jo has cerebral palsy to the point where her arms are inverted in. So to spell one word took about, well, depending on the word, a 3-letter word would take about 5 minutes. So she needs to talk, and that's her communication. I did a little research after I first met Jo, and I found that years ago a provider had ordered, and it came, a communication board where you can eye gaze or push, and it'll communicate for you. So then our Olmsted team put on their investigator's hat, let's go find this. I don't know anything about communication devices, but I knew I could take it out of a box and get rid of this thing. So after learning that the piece of equipment itself was worth about $10,000, I said, well, let's find the right person to do this. We did make the connection, and Jo is in the process of learning how to use her communication device that Medicaid paid for years ago. When speaking with Jo, she told me she wanted to live in her own place by herself. And I'd already was working with Aaron and that team, and I just had a hard time envisioning how can we do this for Jo. And so I said, okay, let's figure this out. And we started talking about supports and friends and family and people in her life. Who do you have that can help us out with that? And she spelled out on her board, nobody. So I said, well, it doesn't mean it can't be done. But let's think about who are some friends in your past that might be able to help you out a little bit. And Joe typed out a word called Donna. I didn't know Donna, but I was hell-bent to find Donna. I found Donna. So we got in touch with Donna. Donna came over to the nursing home. We had a meeting one day. We talked about supported living and thinking, oh, maybe Donna could stop by Joe's place every now and then or provide her some supports in the home around bedtime and meal times. And then Joe typed out in her wrist on her letterboard, AFL. So we put it all together. Joe's wishes and wants were for her to reconnect with her friend Donna, which had happened, and then to eventually move into Donna's home. Joe moved into Donna's home 3 days before Christmas. And this is Joe's room. Joe loves Batman and everything about Batman. Her room is Batmaned out to the gills. And she is very happy in her own home. She has meaningful day activity. She was going to a day program, but she felt she was wasting time there. So we're looking at some college classes at the local community college for her to get involved with, and she said she would like to do some volunteering at the animal shelter, which is right down the road from her. Joe, this was probably the worst part I'd said about Joe's story. Birds really personally freak me out. So the first time I went to go see Joe in her new home, this huge bird was just sort of hanging out, and I was like, that's a health and safety issue. And it's my health and safety issue. Joe is really bonded with Coco. Yeah, so it's a match made in heaven on many sides of life. Since Joe's moved into Donna's house, Donna's helped her reconnect with a few brothers and sisters that she hadn't spoken to in 10 plus years. So to see her go from the skilled nursing facility into this home with supports with Donna and have her family coming back into her life is something great that MFP allowed us to do. And this is Jeannie Bird. This is Joe's homestead care coordinator. And Jeannie was very integral in making sure all the pieces fit together, that she was able to do the HRA and all that good stuff, Nancy, and get a good plan for Joe. Joe's got some wonderful goals, and she's doing very, very well. Janet. Janet's one of my they're all my favorite people, but Janet is a neat lady. I met Janet probably 15 years ago. Janet was a little spitfire. She'd run around. She had a job at Walmart, and life was good for Janet. And then Janet sort of dropped off the radar for me. And then I got a phone call one day from another nursing facility. He said, come get her. Her PASR has expired. We're not getting paid, and we are done. So we said, it's not a matter of what the nursing facility wants. It's what Janet wants. And Janet has a guardian, and her guardian as well. So again, we took the time to go sit down with Janet. Janet entered the nursing home because she was living in a previous setting, and she got sick, and she got weak, and she quit walking, and then she ended up in a wheelchair. And they told the people she was living with, she will never get out of this wheelchair. And she's a bigger lady, and the couple she lived with were small, and they couldn't get a Hoyer lift, so she ended up in this nursing facility. So we got to know Janet, and we're talking to Janet. What do you want, Janet? I want to get out of here. Yeah, we want you to get out of there too, Janet. So in working with her, we cast our nets out there to find if there was a family out there willing to take a woman in a wheelchair. We'll get you a Hoyer lift, and we'll do everything you need just to help support her getting out of this setting. Well, they quickly showed up, and Janet was matched with she met several families. We don't just take an opening, we want it to be a match. You're moving into your home, we want you to be comfortable. She said no to 2. Then the third family that came in, Janet, they sort of fell in love right there and then. They started spending time together even when we weren't around, and they really bonded. The family called me and said, what will it take to get Janet to come live in our home? And I said, we'll get it done. Janet has been in her home since October, doing well. And, Mikkel, can you make up that video play on the right? Her Olmsted care coordinator, went out to see Janet the other day. Her name's Ginger Parker. I don't have a picture of Ginger because she's really shy. But she sent me this video and she said, you gotta see this. None of us thought this would happen.
How we did it? 1, 2, 3, stand up.
So that's Janet standing up. Her provider that she moved into.
I get my balance. So you get your balance. Yeah. How we did it? 1, 2, 3, stand up. There you go. I get my balance. So you get your balance. Yeah.
This is the family that she lives with, in probably a 3,500 square foot home on top of the house.
And I've always been ball. She wants to walk everything. Look at her go. Yeah. So much better than a wheelchair.
So much better than wheelchairs. So Janet is not in a wheelchair. We got rid of the wheelchair. She's using a walker now, and I anticipate probably in 6 months with some more activity and some more strength building, Janet's not going to require the walker. So all because money follows a person in DMA gives us these NC Innovation slots. We're able to support people like Janet, people like Aaron, people like Joe, and we're happy to do so. Since 2013, we've been able to work with 77 individuals who've transitioned out of these institutional settings into residential placements. And it should say homes instead of residential placements, because we live in homes, we don't live in placements. It's a great, great program, and I'm appreciative of Vaya when I do run out of my 9 given slots, and even the ones I poach off of other MCOs. They have created a slot called a B3DI slot for me, just so we can keep on transitioning individuals back into their homes where they want to be. So that is that. Does anyone have any questions?
I know we have
Oh, go ahead.
a waiting list for this, but do the North Carolina residents have a priority on that list to some out of state? I mean, they come in for 3 months, and are they bumping somebody who's?
They're not. That's a part of what my team does, is they do a lot of outreach. We go into facilities within our 23 county catchment area. We go into a lot of ICFs, and we're here, come on out, let's go. We have some providers who are hesitant to let us in their doors. Some providers that just sling those doors open. I had one group here in Asheville call me last week, and they got caught by survey. A survey team comes in, I don't know how often they do in these ICF homes, but they came in and said, this person, and this person, they can't live here. They don't need this level of care. So they called and said, oh, we got caught, we need help. And it's nice to have a wait list, but we try not to ever do that with people who are in those settings.
I'm curious, I was talking with a provider the other day who's kind of helping with getting people out. And we talked about an individual that she had saw that ended up getting an IDD diagnosis while they were in a facility. Now, how in the world do you go from that to that? I'm not quite sure, but it doesn't surprise me. Are you finding that there's a lot of this happening, that a lot of the people are being in these facilities with an IDD diagnosis, which helps keep them there, and they're really not IDD?
Yeah, that is a part of it. I get a lot of calls from a lot of people, Nancy, and I'm not quick to say, well, you don't qualify for the program. We have a process in place within Vaya. When anyone that makes that recommendation, we do a staffing with a lot of clinicians to ensure that they did have IDD. I get a lot of calls from facilities too, and they'll say, oh, this person needs to come out with MFP. And then I'll look in what information I have, and they've never had IDD services. It was horrible. I think maybe it was my own frustration. And I would say back to the social worker, did they catch it there? Because they didn't have it going in.
That's my thing.
Yeah. It's not contagious. It's not.
It really
You don't need a shot or anything.
Jen, have you ever had a client with Rett syndrome?
Yes, I have.
Good, moved to Macon County?
Do you want him to move to Macon
Well, we
County?
have one
Okay.
in Macon County, it's real rare.
Oh, it is.
1 in 10,000.
Yes, it is.
Takes only girls.
It is a girl, young girl that I know.
If you've never seen anybody with Rett syndrome, I mean, these stories, as this child gets older, and nobody knows how to treat because they don't see it.
Right.
I mean, Vaya has helped, and we've went through providers, we've lined up a lot of folks to help. Nobody knows what to do.
Have you tried any of the specialized consultative services?
There's a new one in Greenwood, South Carolina.
Okay.
We did take her to Greenwood. And, but one of these days I don't know if she'll ever be able to go to this point to live, you know, but as she gets older, I just fell in love with the young, you know, I mean, but it is, I mean, you can't put them in, we had to take her out of school because of safety purposes.
Mhm.
I mean, really, truly. And now we're trying to ease her back into school. We did take her to Greenwood, but Rett syndrome, we'll talk about that, what you know. If you already had a client, you might have some really good ideas.
Yeah, definitely. I will definitely follow up with you on that.
Yeah.
And I think there might even be a support group that the family I worked with this young lady were involved in. But
We found
I'll
one
double
other in Caldwell County,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the only two we know of. But in Greenwood, South Carolina, this fella's daughter had Rett syndrome, and he sort of started this clinic. It's not a per se, you know, authorized clinic, but you can go there and you can have the blood test to see the mutation, what cause, you know, and confirm. A lot of it's diagnosed as autism when it's not autism.
Right.
That's the problem. And so we'll talk. I mean, as this young lady evolves, you could really relate to like Joe and some of the others there.
Mm-hmm.
And so very good.
And there's all kinds of settings too. I mean, you think about it, I was probably closer to 30 before I got my financial act together. I didn't have to have a roommate. So individuals with disabilities being roommates works out, just as long as they get along. Not because, oh, you have a disability and I have a disability. That's not about it. It needs to be a good match. Yeah, we can get real
We'll talk.
specific. Yeah.
You can buy my supper.
Tracy, give me the credit card.
How much of your work and your team's work has to do with maintenance of these 77 rather than just placement?
Oh, that's a great question. So with these 77 and the ones that I just featured here, I have a small team of 3 that works on getting these individuals out. They each are assigned a care coordinator, and that care coordinator will stay with them for the rest of their time in our system. My team sort of fades away. So after, it just depends on the need of the individual. So between 3 and 6 months, we sort of step back. And that's the hardest part my team has. Like, I had to get on to one of them who transitioned someone a year ago. And I said, you cannot go to Charlotte one more time. But he needs me. No, you need him. So it's sort of hard for us to break up, but we have to in a sense. But if something happened too, where all of a sudden they've taken a turn and they're not doing well, and I hate to hear, well, maybe they need to go back. Maybe let's get together and talk about it. Let's see what the issue is before we even go down that road.
So you plan on 3 to 6 months and then PRN?
And yeah, and then the care coordinator is there, and they're making monthly contacts face to face and all that.
So you guys are all in the same team, I mean, y'all are
We
all
are.
in the same department?
We are. Yeah, my team's embedded in care coordination as well.
Is care coordination through MTF or is it through BIOS?
Through Vaya. And my team is through Vaya too. MFP just provides us the slots. It's okay. We're acronym talk.
I thought he was talking about a different acronym. I want an acronym definition book. Is there one? I figured there probably was, but I can't be the first person.
I just want the little laminated.
It's volume 430.
Yeah, it's like that learning curve. It's like, woo!
Like learning a foreign language.
It's like 10 pages long, but I'll give it to you.
Yeah, it would be helpful.
It's really small print too.
Hey, I'm ready.
They make glasses.
Unlike Ronnie, I'm ready.
Just let Mike hold it, you can cross it over.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank y'all,
Thank you,
appreciate
Jen.
it.
Thank you. Thanks.
You have trouble getting her to be enthusiastic.
Yeah, you constantly have no light fire.
Yeah, Tracy asked me, are you nervous? And I just sort of laughed. I get nervous when I get home, not at work.
All right, report of our Chief Executive Officer, Brian.
Yeah, I sort of Renee Fallow talked to you about the goings on in Raleigh. If that doesn't bring you down, I don't know. There's been a real collection of activity in the last, really this week, on Medicaid transformation and legislation that need to be drafted in order for the department to have a procurement on the standard plans in the spring. So it is all about that right now. And because that requires legislation, it gets people really engaged, let's just say. And especially because the legislation has to do with the mild to moderate population and moving out of our capitation into the standard plans. And when I say standard plans, does everybody understand what I'm talking about with that? Yes and no. Let's rewind the tape here. There's going to be two managed care products, if you will, in North Carolina. Standard plans will be these large statewide insurance plans for physical health and some amount of behavioral health for the general population. So all of physical health in North Carolina is going to be in Medicaid managed care. 3 contracts statewide that will be let, and some number of regional contracts for provider-led entities. And it's almost like a whole different part of the discussion, but because it's really not clear how many of those we'll ever see. But the big action is around these big, and these are multi-billion-dollar contracts we're talking about. So this is a real, North Carolina is like a glowing beacon, a green space as it's being called. It's the last state with a sizable Medicaid population that hasn't done this. So we're really on the map. So the procurement for the standard plans, the Secretary would like to see that happen in the spring. In order for her to do that, she needs permission, endorsement from the General Assembly. And she has also decided to include in that standard plan, which is predominantly around physical health, the mild to moderate population of individuals that are part of our capitation, that are our members now. Okay? So that requires a change in legislation to take them away from us and put them in that plan is a big deal. And what people want to see is, for that to occur, some clarity around what will happen with the tailored plans. The tailored plans are anticipated to come a couple of years after the standard plans, and that will be for a select number of individuals, about 125,000 statewide, that have very significant behavioral health or IDD needs. So for example, these folks that we just saw, they would be in the tailored plan, okay, along with individuals with chronic mental illness, very serious substance use. So it's intended to be a high needs plan. So, getting things lined up for there to be legislation to enable the secretary to have the procurement competitively bid. All the big insurance companies are all coming trying to win that contract. The secretary wants that bidding to occur in the spring.
Spring 2018, it's not 2019.
Yes, this year. But she needs legislation to do it. And we, say collectively, know that for that population of mild to moderate to move into standard plans and away from us, now is the time when we have the leverage to get something figured out about tailored plan. Because if that were to happen without us having something very real, we'd have no leverage in the future for much, right? So it's caused there to be a real crescendo of activity and effort around trying to get agreement around what kind of language would be suitable to meet the secretary's needs, to want to get on with this, but to also meet the needs of folks that care about the LME MCO system and its future. Have enough certainty in the legislation that would provide comfort for sort of a trade, if you will. That's what I can tell you about that now. Last week, Tuesday, I was invited to be a presenter in the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee for Health and Human Services, and I did a presentation on essentially the opioid crisis, and provided some broad statewide information and then more information specific to Western North Carolina.
Is this the presentation in the pack?
Yeah. We're actually we'll show that tomorrow. We're gonna cover that briefly this evening. It was interesting because right before my presentation was a presentation by Steve Owen, who works for the General Assembly in a department called Fiscal Research. It was all about these questions about fund balance, reinvestment, how much money there is, and I'm just kind of sitting and I by kind of eye contact and text message, I knew that this would be coming. So of course, this is like it's like a lightning rod. It's like Cardinal. How many months will there be these meetings where people ask about Cardinal and have all that? This is the same kind of thing, because all the comments about why do they have so much money, why can't they do the things they want to do. Senator Tucker asked about a project in the northern region, and it was his understanding that now we didn't have the money for this. Why was that? Representative Dollar asked if I would offer some comment, and so before I knew it, it was way into that.
Brian, Senator Randall, and I actually saw her last night, and she knew I was coming up here apparently, and she asked me the same thing, and she told me she had done directly $2 with the project. For some reason, I understand that. She wants that project to go forward, and she's pushing.
So do I.
Yeah, and so do I, but we're also realistic. She's pushing that, and that's some of the reason for the comments, I would think. There's only 50 of them.
I think Senator Tucker actually asked it to demonstrate the types of things that are so important for communities that we can no longer do. So even though know, everybody wants to do, you know, fill in the blank. I mean, I was just a convenient person there, and Tommy knew about that project, and you know, kind of fit with the, but really the point was, you know, there's a lot of important things that people want and need, and that we want to do, it's kind of on the docket, but because our money is being, we're being required to use our fund balance for other purposes rather than the investment efforts in the community that we would like to do. Or we're not.
You say that, Brian?
Yes, I did.
Very good.
Is that primarily the indigent care? Is that
Well,
is that primarily what's going on?
sure. The, you know what, I found the file that would really tell the story. It's maybe over dinner or something, if people are interested, we show you that, because it does give you both a macro view of what's happening to the money. It's really just like I'm saying to you, the ability to generate profit or savings through the you know, proper management of Medicaid, which is the point of this, right? It's the point of it. Don't anybody think that's a bad thing. If you don't make some money on this, you end up like a couple of programs that don't exist anymore. So don't confuse that. You know, that you're going to see negatives for every program for the year except for one in the state. Okay. We're not making a profit, nor is anyone else. And I mean, there's a lot of good reasons for that. You know, we're being required to use our fund balance for the supplementation of the reductions in single stream funding. So essentially, you know, the General Assembly is saying, we're not going to fill the bucket with the money that's been promised. We're going to fill it this much. We're going to require the NCOs to fill that bucket, okay? Which takes away from our available cash, which takes away from our ability to fund projects like it. It's just that simple.
Sounds like a county budget to me, Rick. We've heard that term before.
Yeah, well, these are real big numbers, and it's been an ongoing process. And the difference this year, well, in this 2-year budget cycle, maybe we're just fools, because the language in the budget's legislation previously did not indicate that these sorts of reductions in single stream and our required supplementation of that, those were considered one-time budget items. Now the language in the budget is that it's recurring. So how long can that go on?
And here's another problem, the rank and file of the legislature, and Brian, I think, agreed with this. They do not know what single stream funding is. They don't have a clue, Brian. All they see is the big numbers.
Well, and there was one senator that stood out and said that they still have $1 billion, and we've cut them all of this, so I don't know what the problem is. Which is, again, it's kind of where we started, I think, earlier, and I said, that's factually incorrect, and we can show you the spreadsheets that are the information that's reported to the state that they use. And it's not that number, it's the available cash that there is. So you saw the trend on that chart, right? About how many days of cash we had. So you see how that's going down. But it's not a soundbite, and that's what I said to, did I say that in open session? I may have. I spoke pretty extensively with a reporter afterwards too, like half an hour worth of just kind of explaining. It's not a soundbite, but so much of what occurred in those settings is about soundbites.
they're not gonna be able to do that with private insurers.
Of course not.
They're gonna have a
No, they'll
fixed
just
number,
leave it.
and the only way they're gonna find out what's going on is people losing coverage.
Well, and if the rates don't work, they'll just leave.
Did the presenter of the legislature mention just what Commissioner Kennedy talked about? Did he mention the private sector? Was he giving his report on?
Well, one of the, there was, I think it was in that committee meeting, you know, actually Nelson, Representative Dollar mentioned that, you know, you've got all of this hubbub about the money, but you know where it is. You know exactly where it is, you can count it to the penny. Well, you think Aetna is gonna provide that information, that money is going in someone's pockets. And before you get too upset about that, you know, go home and look at your 401k holdings tonight and see, right? How many of these, you depend on that profit to be able to retire someday. I mean, that's how all of that works, you know, I mean, it's profit. It's shareholder profit. But that's much, much different than the system we have now, which has, I mean, total transparency and the ability to use those funds for things like a facility-based crisis at Wilkes, except that our money's being taken away so the state can save money by forcing us to use the fund balance.
And that's not even getting to the profit that those companies are gonna wanna take out of that contract. So that they're not, that's being used in our state by the LMEMCs when it's not taken back. It's crazy.
Well, the profit isn't gonna stay in North Carolina. You know, none of the major, there's no major insurance companies that are domiciled in North Carolina. So you can't even say that the, you know, profits are gonna go to people that work at, you know, I mean, they have some offices here, but, you know, their corporate headquarters are not here. Keep swinging until they knock me out, right, Ronnie?
You got that right.
But it's
You have to keep your nose in the trough.
It's kind of counterintuitive because, you know, with our providers, we're going into, you know, public management of private services. And you take away that public management part, and then it's all private. And those providers are gonna have to argue with the insurance companies instead of with Vaya, public company.
Well,
It's
so the
kind
doctors are gonna be, it's gonna be a rough go.
Well, this goes back to the meeting we had, what, 2 years ago? When we started rearing its head, I forget where we were at having the meeting, like we were in Asheville. And had this same call.
Oh, yeah, it's been going on.
And so, but if it goes to privatization, this group won't be.
Well, I'm not done yet.
I'm not even.
And we're still here.
I'm counting on it. We can talk about that a little later.
And we're not part of it.
We're on the verge of, and I don't know, I mean, it's being talked about, of private consultants managing county DSS departments as well. I mean, we're right on the cusp of that. Now, the discussion is, you know, it's all over the place, but it's narrowing down to, if you don't do it, we're gonna send a private. I mean, the philosophy is, I assume with the legislature, that the private side can do it better or more efficiently, slightly more efficiently or something.
Well,
That's just a general prevailing
best
attitude.
practice.
But we get to pay for it.
Best practices is the word that you always hear from the consultant, these private, and I
Well,
was.
you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, I was our
Child-
consultant, and the health directors is the same way, your local health department. Best practices.
So it's just a, I mean, it's just, it's a big, part of a bigger trend. I know the numbers are big, but,
Absolutely right.
and
No,
regional
it's,
organization.
You know, it's a great, I guess, philosophical argument, you know, it really goes to what are the right things that government should be doing, right? I mean, that's the, you know, there's a place there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I think, so you look at an organization like us, and, we're kind of in many regards, because what's happened is, our evolution is way outstripped, the statutes, the governing statutes in our structure. It doesn't make any sense anymore. But, here we are, right? We've built this really great machine, and we're, it's sitting on top of a, old hay wagon chassis. Well, that would have been, and that was fine back when it was a different type of operation, but it's, so you have that too. It's hard for a government to be progressive as there's an evolution with business models too. I mean, that's the kind of problem we face. I mean, you could argue that this is great to be public, but we're being constrained in ways that just don't really make sense.
Well, you can make government organizations not work if you want to.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what I see, and it's not conspiracy, but just malicious or undermining government, functioning government systems is a consistent mantra.
So you could be mad as hell if they're taking our money away from us, using it for the money, the hundreds of millions of dollars that they save by not funding it. There's a net loss to this whole big system, right? Does everybody understand that? Because there's people that don't understand that. They think, oh, well, you're just making up the difference, so it's all the same. Yeah, that's like saying, Gary, we're gonna cut your paycheck of $200 this week, and you take it out of your savings, so it'll be the same, right? Right? It's the same. Yeah, no, it's $200 less. It's $200 less. So those hundreds of millions of dollars that have gone out of the system went to, balance the budget. So it's the whole system that's being impacted. We're the mechanism for it to occur. We're the cash cow, as Senator Tucker would say. We're the cash cow.
Well, there's a lot of discussion in different counties and different governments have different viewpoints about what is an appropriate and defensive interval. And, and you talked about that 1 month thing, that's the minimum standard for government, is you've got to have 8%, which is about a month, I think. If you get below that, the government, the overseers come in and start looking at what you're doing. So I don't know where it came from, but that's the minimum standard, and I assume it what applies to government almost kind of also would apply to a nonprofit, but you can, I guess that in their minds.
Yeah,
and so if you've got too big of a fund balance as either a nonprofit or a government, immediately you know that the legislature is going to look at that fund balance and say, Wilkes County's got a 35% fund balance. They don't need us to pay for those reduced class size and K through 2. They can take care of it themselves out of the fund balance.
How are you going to make me angry?
So you don't want a large fund balance in that situation, because it looks like something that they can, since you are only an arm of them and you only exist because of them, they can do whatever they want with your money.
That
basically.
Yeah,
you feel that?
My granddaughter is one of 2 students at Sawmills Elementary going to pre-K that's having to pay. It's costing my son $400 a month for her to go to pre-K. If any of you folks can fix this, I wish you would. Or at least when they're out for a week, out of the month, for snow the whole week, they don't have to pay the whole $400 when they don't go to school for 3 weeks in a month.
And that's like some of the best return on your money. Early childhood care is like some of the 10 to 1 or something, the return on your dollar spent. So that's wasted money from the government not to take care of that child because they're gonna pay more later.
There's a big push for universal pre-K now. The Institute on Emerging Issues is having a forum in a couple of weeks or a couple of days, and that's gonna be the only topic for 2 days is funding. But again, I mean, $10,000 a student, who's gonna pay for it? Rick?
Yeah.
Is the county gonna raise property taxes to pay for it? I don't know. So we're conflicted. As commissioners, we think that's a good idea because like Billy said, it's clearly, by all the statistics and measures any of us have ever seen, it is money well spent. Ronnie? But it's an unfunded mandate if the counties are pushed into the position to help pay for it. And so we have to oppose it.
And that early childhood trauma ends up in our care with mental health issues down the road.
Irrefutable.
Well, I don't want dinner to get cold here. I need to.
No, that'll never happen. Go build a fire under it.
It's out there. It's out there.
We're ready to.
Yeah.
We're ready.
I don't know that.
We only digress a little bit, didn't we, Gary?
It all kind of falls into the same.
It's all part of the big picture.
Yeah.
I was
It's
gonna
all,
play the video of the annual report.
it's all
Let's do that real quick.
Okay.
fighting
Wait 1 minute.
legislation.
Ronnie's.
Get something to eat and
Wanna get some
play the video.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do that. Has
Motion
everybody-
to eat.
Has everybody,
Second.
has everybody checked in their rooms?
I'm staying with my mother, so I don't need to.
Okay.
I'm going home.
All right.
Then we'll pick up, the hard copies are not all printed of the annual report, so we thought we'd just do a video of it. Maybe we did we put hard copies in just in your packets?
No.
No? Okay.
Let's eat, then we'll come back in here and watch the video. How's that?
Then what was coming on this day?
Just taking a little break for eating.
Go wait.
Bring your
You're missing
plate
that.
back.
Do we have any status about
Yeah, of course we do, just for
Okay, we're going.
What is that?
Here we
Is that
are.
a trust company?
So you took it here.
I think we're gonna take a day off work.
You wanna? What was our planes involved?
I just want to tell you, it took a long time for me to balance those rocks like that.
That was good.
And Jay, he's a stonemason, so he'd really appreciate that.
Jay Carter.
Yep.
He charged somebody for it. Somebody
I
paid
had
you.
Cadillac Mountain up in Maine, and those things are all over, they're directional. It's kind of like what they use as a directional. Because there's no trees up there, hardly, so they gotta use rocks.
Too many rocks.
Yeah, a lot of rocks.
Too many
There's a
rocks.
lot of rocks on Cadillac Mountain.
Thank you, Tracy.
All right, let her roll, Mikhail.
Sure. We wanted y'all to see it before it went to print, but I do have
wrong place.
That's covered it.
Well received.
Where did we have to get that? Can you figure that?
Annual report to shareholders? The annual report to shareholders.
Some of his colleagues were struggling to get for you. I guess he's trying to play both sides.
Dr. Con,
Anyway.
we think of it as the annual report to stakeholders.
Stakeholders.
Rather than shareholders.
Very good.
I was getting ready to sell my.
Nothing else we think.
I'm all about you.
It's the proof billing.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
Ronnie, you ready to get started?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman,
Everybody get plenty to eat? Okay.
We're getting there.
Ronnie was cooking all day.
We're getting there.
All right, our next item is our closed session. Closed session pursuant to North Carolina Statute 143, 318, 11, A, 1, more to prevent foreclosure of competitive health. Pursuant to North Carolina Statute 142C, 126.1, or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statute, or to consult with the attorneys pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A3. Is there a motion to go into?
Motion to go into closed session and determine the divisions as listed.
Motion and a second. Get that?
Now, who's second?
Aye. All in favor of going to closed session, say aye.
Come on, man.